Almost everyone has heard of Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine and the wealthiest criminal in history. One would think that he wouldn't have had any rivals because he was so frightening and had so much power. But when you lead a business that generates billions of dollars, you could expect that someone would want a piece of it. And one such kingpin who was daring enough to wage a war against Pablo Escobar was the equally smart and brutal Elmer Herrera. Stick with us to find out who won the war between Elmer and Escobar. Francisco Elmer Herrera Buitrago, also known as Pacho or H7, was born on the 24th of August 1951 in the city of Palmira, Valle del Cauca, Colombia. There is not much information about his early life. After finishing high school, he moved to New York City to further his studies. He studied technical maintenance and gained some work experience. He has always been interested in jewels, which is probably what led him to become a jeweler. Even though he was getting paid decent wages, he realized he wanted more. Herrera started getting involved in the drug business. And as happens to most people who get into this world, Herrera did get arrested. In 1975, the NYPD arrested Herrera on charges of selling minor amounts of cocaine. 4 years later, in 1979, he was caught on the same charges. Both of these times he was let go without much repercussion, a decision they would soon regret. During the 1970s, the United States authorities, such as the DEA, were focusing on the illegal trade of opium and heroin. This was mostly because of the deteriorating relationships with states like China, Vietnam, and Myanmar, which are responsible for most of the distribution of opium in the United States. This enabled dealers of marijuana and cocaine to flourish and establish a large business empire. As any smart businessman should, the founding members of the Cali cartel saw an opening. The Cali cartel was a drug cartel based in southern Colombia, founded in the city of Cali, from which it got its name. The founding members were the brothers Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela, Miguel Rodriguez, and Jose Santa Cruz Londono. Once close associates of the drug kingpin Pablo Escobar, they parted ways later on. The Cali cartel was primarily involved in dealing marijuana. However, the ratio of benefits to the cost and risk of trafficking marijuana was much lower than that of cocaine. As a result, they decided to switch to the cocaine trade. The American cocaine business was largely controlled by the Italian mafia. The Colombians needed someone who knew how to run things in the United States. This is how Pacho Herrera became relevant. When he moved back to Colombia in 1983, he made contact with the Cali cartel. His experience with dealing in the United States and his smarts persuaded the Orejuela brothers to convince him to join them. This strategy was very successful. The business bloomed, and Herrera quickly rose up the ranks. He became a prominent name in the drug trade. Under Herrera, the drug trade in the U.S. was making nearly $8 billion per year. Herrera worked in creating and managing many supply channels with cells that work independently. These channels were connected to different networks. This makes it seem as if each distributor was working independently and that there wasn't a bigger force behind them. Even if one of those cells is broken down or caught by the authorities, they wouldn't be able to trace it back to the real parties behind the trade. He was able to smuggle huge amounts of cocaine from Colombia into New York. He was seen as the face of the cartel in the United States. Herrera would go to any length to ensure that only the best things happened for the cartel. He was quite brutal and violent at times. What was quite interesting was that Pacho was homosexual. Well, not the fact that he was homosexual, but the fact that he was deeply respected by his peers and was never questioned. This was very unusual because, during those times, homosexuals were looked down upon. He was also one of the favorites among the members of the Cali cartel. It goes to show that money and loyalty go a long way for cartel members. Herrera was always focused on making more money for the cartel. He set up another system. In the distant jungles of Peru and Bolivia, he built several processing facilities that made cocaine. This cocaine was later smuggled to the United States. He formed alliances with Colombia's Revolutionary Armed Forces and the guerrilla group 19th of April movement. The relationships he formed with them were intended to strengthen the protection of the plants he created. Pacho also owned a number of buildings and had money in a number of legal businesses in the United States. These places acted as money laundering fronts for his main business. Pacho also spent a lot of money on himself. He built a 14-story building that had a swimming pool. He owned nearly 70 cars. He was an avid football fan. He even built a football stadium with the best lighting and professional-grade turf for his personal use. Well, soon enough, he was going to get into a feud with the biggest drug kingpin in history. You guessed it right, Pablo Escobar. How it started is quite bizarre. In the late 1980s, two low-level cocaine traders got into an altercation over a woman they both wanted. It resulted in a gunfight which several people met their end. One of them went to Pacho and his cartel for protection. Pacho agreed. Little did he know that one of the men he killed was a friend of Pablo Escobar. When Pablo demanded the head of the shooter, Herrera declined. This marked the beginning of an all-out war between the Cali cartel and the Medellin cartel. Both sides traded shots and bodies. In 1988, one of Herrera's targets was an apartment complex owned by Escobar. In the attack, an explosion completely destroyed the building and took the lives of 3 people. It's believed that Escobar's family was the intended target, but the attack did not even leave a scratch on them. But the fact that Pacho missed his target didn't mean Escobar would forget what happened. He was infuriated with rage. This took the cartel war to a whole new level. Escobar ordered several hits on Pacho. One of the hits was in 1990. This was during one of Pacho's favorite hobbies, watching a football match. Escobar's assassins, who were disguised as policemen, opened fire towards the crowd where Pacho was sitting. The attempt did claim lives, the lives of 18 bystanders, while Pacho escaped unharmed. The very next year in 1991, there was another attempt at assassinating Pacho. He was assaulted by a group of gunmen. Most noticeably, a hooded gunman with a pink bracelet ambushed Herrera. Around 17 people lost their lives and another 13 was severely injured. But this did not include Herrera, a lucky man, one would say. Even though they were both throwing everything at each other and the war didn't seem like it would stop anytime soon, something surprisingly happened. An enemy's enemy is your friend. The Colombian government. The cartels used their resources to carry out a series of high-profile killings and kidnappings that forced the government to change the constitution. Extradition to the United States was no longer legal in Colombia. But soon after this, the war continued. Soon, in 1993, Pablo Escobar was taken down. Pacho Herrera was said to play an important role in what led up to this. With the death of Escobar, the Medellin cartel was left in ruins, and the world was waiting for Pacho Herrera. They had a huge monopoly on the drug trade, supplying 80% of the world's cocaine and pulling in a revenue of more than $8 billion a year. Well, this would leave you wondering what would have led to the fall of such a successful kingpin. Since Escobar died, he no longer had any rivals competing for his territory. However, this also made him the center of attention. The law enforcement authorities started focusing on bringing down Pacho. A bounty of 1 billion pesos was placed on Herrera for any information that could lead to his arrest. The DEA had captured several dealers who were working for Pacho. Confessions and information obtained from them led to the DEA issuing an arrest warrant against Pacho Herrera. Herrera decided to flee. Even though his life was still luxurious, it was nothing compared to the 14-story building and the fleet of over 70 cars that he had access to. He had to be on the run. A few years went by and he realized that the walls were closing in on him. Things were getting too heated. So Pacho decided to turn himself in to the police. He was sentenced to prison for 6 years and 8 months for drug trafficking. However, in 1998, this sentence was extended to 14 years. But he did not serve his full sentence. Nope, he did not get released from jail early. One morning, Pacho was playing football on the prison field. A man who disguised himself as a lawyer approached Herrera and shot him several times in the torso and head. The man, who evaded several assassination attempts, ran out of luck. Well, one could say that he was lucky in his death, as he died while doing what he loved the most. That was the end of Elmer Herrera, but this story does make one wonder what would have happened if he never waged a war against Pablo Escobar. What if they actually joined hands and became an unstoppable force? I guess we'll never know. But let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting crime stories.